do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight has set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror, an audience, or the light of gratitude. Everything!
I'm turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness and a chaotic rust. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's here, and it's not visiting anymore. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep. It's easy for the dead to tend to fight. And maybe it's true. Maybe fighting's useless. Perhaps it's too late. But I'll tell you this. If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire!
What is it they've sent us?
How?
What?
The reason the Star Wars sequel sucked was because it was that despite having 3 different successful artists and many more in production for each film, their narrative was non-existent. Whoever contributed to the narrative of each of these films was not in touch with reality or the common man, which is why when Andor came out, it resonated with so many people. And a big aspect of the story is following Cassian Andor, who lives a cruel and dirty life, but finds a meaning and hope in the rebellion and actually being able to stop something that seems unstoppable. Throughout his journey, seeing both sides of the spectrum, having been someone raised from the slums and even a place lacking of technology, to his espionage adventures where he actually gets to see the other side of Imperial tyranny. Eventually his journey bringing him to the point where he's ready to fight for the rebellion even though it seems like a losing battle. And if any of the previous Star Wars writers, especially for the sequels, were writing the story, they would have had Cassian continue to stop the big bad guy or just get straight to Rogue One without any real consequences. But a plot point within the Andor series that I really enjoyed was when Cassian ended up making an escape after an incredibly dangerous heist with a lot of cash. I fully anticipated him to take these resources and end up joining up with the rebellion right after that moment. But instead, he goes to a vacation world and ends up getting arrested just on the street for a crime he didn't even commit, showing that Cassian is not the main character of this story, and evil has spread so wide that even just the common man is subject to its cruelty. But that's not the only scene I think a lot of Disney writers would have messed up within this series. Another big sequence within the show would be within Season 2, and again, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but a big plot point in Season 2 is the Gorman population and their rising tensions with the Empire. The Empire, eager to find access to the resources residing beneath Gorman and deciding to stage some more political tensions and get them all amped up and riled up in the hopes of foreseeing some sort of aggressive retaliation. With an aggressive retaliation, it would give the Empire full jurisdiction to wipe everyone out in the name for good. Tony Gilroy and his team decided to make this a more realistic narrative experience. See, the Empire are hoping to escalate tensions while the Gorman people are protesting. However, the Gorman people don't subject themselves to the violence the authoritarian regime wants them to. They choose harmony, they choose standing together, despite how many of them are filled with rage and anger and passion towards this thing that seems like a moral wrong, or a regime that seems like it shouldn't be there, a regime that treats a community of people like they are nothing but an obstacle in their way to the resources they want. They chose instead to make their voice heard. Unfortunately, evil is a sneaky devil, and the regime had already set up a plan in place to enact violence and aggression, whether it was on Gorman's behalf or not, with an officer from the Imperial side of things instigating the entire conflict altogether. And I say conflict lightly. This wasn't a battle. This wasn't a war. This was a massacre. These civilians, despite maybe putting up a little bit of a fight, stood no chance against the plans that were already being put in place against them. And an act of cruelty at a scale as large and grand as this, especially within a Star Wars story, could simply be where you leave things off. But that would make the story a bit more of a nihilistic take. See, Andor is a story of hope. A story that tells you that rebelling in any way, shape, or form you can could potentially contribute to the future. By that I mean, you could become a very foundation of the rebellion like Lutheran and deal with the costs that come with that role. Or you could even contribute in the smallest ways that you can, like the IT guys did in Andor. See, in Andor, these IT guys were the only thing stopping the Empire from shutting down one of the most impactful speeches in the entire series. A speech that helped ignite the flames of the rebellion and grow in their numbers. A speech that raised awareness to the cruelty happening around the universe, but also with the Gorman massacre altogether. A speech that could have easily been cut off a lot earlier should two random technicians decide not to stand their ground and simply dissuade the officer from getting to what he wants. Andor proves that any small act of resistance to what should be seen as fascism does actually go a long way. And while art does imitate life, you could easily see inspirations from this being in previous world wars that we fought over for similarly morally cruel things. But there's also an argument to be made that life also imitates art. Maybe where you live, you don't feel safe. Maybe because of your skin color, you don't know if the van next to you could be your very own hearse. Maybe you have family or loved ones who cheer for the cruelty displayed on TV. Tunnel visioned to whatever sources are feeding them whatever knowledge they should be thinking, and neglect to provide you any respect in regards to civil conversation revolving around political topics. Maybe you feel you can't talk to certain people or even say certain things. Maybe you feel alone. And that's exactly what the people in power would want. For years, we've been given tools that have helped build our complacency over time. Things that allow us to ruin our minds and attention spans and allow us to doom scroll and stay entertained without even moving a muscle. And now, the world is providing even more reasons for you to isolate, to stay inside, to avoid the stress, or for a lot of folk, to avoid the literal danger that could be right outside their doors. So then what are we to do? Are we meant to stay alone, to stay aware but at arm's length, to literally hear and see the confirmation of one of the world's darkest conspiracies being brought to light, that of the horrific cabal that Epstein was a part of? Are we simply to refrain to commenting on YouTube and Twitter about how we feel and patting ourselves on the back like we actually made a difference? Or even getting distracted from horrific things like the survivors of Epstein and their stories by things they're shoving in your face like,
how many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even?
The Dow right now is over 50 thou. I don't know why you're laughing. That's what we should be talking about. The Dow right now. S&P at almost 7 thou. The American people need to know this. Need to know how is the Dow.
Let me address the survivors because that's
How is the Dow.
No! Don't let yourself get distracted by Goodwill Harley Quinn. Of course you need to stay alert and stay safe, but most importantly, you need to stay active, now more than ever. And you can still contribute from the comfort of your home. Despite people claiming it doesn't work, you can call your state's representative and make your voice heard. For these systems and institutions may be devoid of any moral decency, they do care a lot about optics. And with enough public pushback, we can actually make them worry or even stress. You can also simply stay informed. There's a very obvious reason to believe that a lot of people in power would prefer the common American to be more dumb, more subjective to whatever they want to spew your way. You could do your own research. If you see headlines or articles or even just a comment stating something, do the due diligence and actually look into things yourself. Make sure to keep loved ones around you accountable and educated on current happenings of what's going on. And if these conversations result in a bit of aggressive tension, then maybe be a little bit more respectful and understand that some people are a little too caught up in their ways to really be open-minded to the point of acknowledging some of the cruelty going on around. But that doesn't mean you can't still bear witness to other people around you. People who are too scared to look too deep into things and aren't quite sure what to do. People who don't realize they can reach out to the representatives and make a difference. People who don't realize their voice matters and can actually make a difference. Whether that be shopping family owned or contributing to strikes that you feel are morally important. I left a few links in the description below in ways that you can actually go and make a difference or at least get active in what's going on. There's so much you can do, and you don't even have to leave the house. You could contribute from the comfort of your home,
or you can come and protest.
People across America are outside and gathering into communities to stand up for what they feel is right. They are illustrating their creativity in art and battling authoritarianism with absurdism. Hence why you see so many frog and crazy costumes around. But why exactly do this? Well, it's because it makes a fascist narrative much harder to control. See, a big part of any authoritarian regime is you need control. You need the predictability of the story taking place within the populace. In other words, an authoritarian regime needs a completely incompetent populace that are subject and submissive to any BS they might be spewing your way. If they know that poking you in the stomach enough will eventually result in you punching them in the face, it may have already been a part of their plan. The best way to control the narrative is to make the narrative a little less controlled. Bring some chaos, bring some absurdity, bring something that only human beings that are free of will could really bring, which is creative inspiration. This means if anyone tries to tell you there are violent protesters killing and maiming everybody they see, you could maybe instead look with the very same tools they developed to keep us complacent and find the truth for your very own eyes. Evil is powerful, but it doesn't rule the world. We outnumber them. And while it is an uphill battle, you can still make your voice heard. You don't have to feel alone. If there's one thing most people can agree on, it's that evil flames attempting to burn us down need to be extinguished and covered with the veil of love that we all provide if we just come together. Who knows, you could even meet one of the most important people in your entire life's journey, all by simply going out and speaking up for what you believe in is right. Hate is powerful and hate is violent, but love is rewarding. And choosing love may be a harder fight than any physical one you could find yourself in. But if you can find the means to remain open-minded, even with those you heavily disagree with, then you're that much closer to just finding peace within such a crazy and chaotic world. And to anyone that is annoyed that an Andor video is being tied so heavily to today's modern politics, feel free to bounce away and hop to some other more entertaining channels that probably fit your niche a little more. Either way, there won't be too many political videos on this channel, but every now and then I do kind of want to raise awareness to some of the crazy things that are going on and poke a little few jabs here and there. This video probably being my most expressive I'll be about modern day politics, should they not get excruciatingly worse. Either way, stay safe, speak up, and remember, all it really takes is you.